Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where we talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Cleaning Lady. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we're picking up with Fiona's situation. Obviously had to call Tony in, and it is this complicated thing of, Fiona had to act because, her son's life was in danger, but Tony was like, I told you to wait, but she's like, I tried to call you. It's like, oh, you were doing something for Armand. It's like, actually, it was Garrett. It's like, oh, it doesn't matter. It's like, well, it does, because Garrett's is the one that's going to throw you in jail, but she also doesn't like the fact that Tony's got these two dudes in her life that are basically controlling everything. I mean, it's like, because he was basically threatening, like, oh, I can, throw Fiona in jail because and Tony's not telling her about that because it's like, right, Tony has had every reason to help out Garrett just to protect Fiona, but it's also the thing of Fiona's got so much on her plate with this, worried about Chris and everything, so it's like Tony's not trying to add anymore, but Tony's the one that's got to juggle everything. She's the one with the secret. She's the one having to do everything. Not everything, but obviously Fiona's involved too, but Tony's the one kind of ends up taking a lot of that on. Just for the sake of she knows she kind of inadvertently dragged her family into this, and they are the most important people to her, so she's going to do whatever it takes to save them. So they're tying up the guy who works at the motel, John. He wakes up and he's like, cool, let me go and you pay me, we'll walk away. It's like, well, first and foremost, once again, blackmailers. You tried to pay him what he asked. He was like, oh, now let's keep this up as a monthly installment. Two, you let him go. What's the first thing? Who's to say he's not going to just take the money, bounce, and rat you out to the police? It's like, you can't trust the guy, and they know they can't either. So what do? Tony wants to call Armand, but Fee doesn't want to because it's like, no, this is a family thing, and he's not family. This is my son. Sadly, Tony, beneficially for all of them, but, Fee didn't appreciate Armand getting called. And he shows up because, Tony asked him to. And it's like, right, I love that when he shows up and Fiona's like, I'm Fee. Fiona. You can call me whatever you want to. I'm like, are you flustered because, Armand is Armand? You're like, oh my God, this guy's so scary. Or is it because you're like, oh wow, I didn't realize, wait, you've never actually seen Armand before. Interesting. And I guess it's maybe a thing of oh wow, he's actually really handsome. So it's a combination of he's scary. It's because he's scary and all that he is, but also he's handsome. So it's like that complicated, you're feeling all these emotions at once. Because the way she was kind of flustered, I took that as at first, oh, are you flustered because you didn't realize Armand's a handsome motherfucker. So that's what I was wondering about that. So either way, it's he's kind of chuckles like, oh, wow, did you tie him up? And Tony's like, yeah. And it's like, wow, you picked up a few things. And, glad to see you kind of learned from your experiences rolling with me and everything we've been involved in. So it is a situation of Armand's like, yeah, we're going to have to kill this guy. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, well, the fact of the matter is this type of guy, extortion, it never goes away. He's not going to stop. But Fiona's like, no. The reason why she didn't even want Armand involved in the first place is it's a family thing, but also she's like, I already got enough blood on my hands. I don't want any more with just everything we've got going on. She just wants to protect her son. And the fact is, Chris going through what he's going through right now, too, because, Fiona's only got a small picture of it. We as the audience saw him in front of that truck. He's suicidal. He doesn't think he deserves to live. He's like, I'm a terrible person. Not only did I just kill someone, he killed his uncle. So it cuts even deeper. It's like, I'm the reason why. Because Luca means a lot to him, obviously. It's like, yo, that's his, nephew. I was trying to piece that together in my head. Yeah, that's his nephew. And so it's like, right, you've always been there to support him and help him. And now you're like, oh, you're the reason why his father's no longer alive. Of course, that's going to severely mess you up. And that guilt, and especially his family saying his mom being like, we're doing everything we can to protect you, got to do your part. That's not going to alleviate any of his own guilt. It's not going to make it any better. In fact, it's probably going to make him feel even more guilty that his mom and his aunt had to go bend over backwards to go above and beyond to save him. And it's like, right, I'm not worth saving, And he even said, he smashed the mirror in the school bathroom because he couldn't look at his reflection anymore. It's like, right, what does, he doesn't see himself anymore. He just sees probably what he did. All he sees is Chris the murderer, not just Chris, So I think all that, and, the moment Tony suggested they put ice in the bath to scare, because Tony's reluctant about killing the guy too, because he's like, right, I was a witness and you didn't kill me either. And he was like, you were different. It's like, you were a different circumstance because you also proved yourself to be super useful. It's like, well, we can't trust this guy because it's not like Tony was blackmailing anyone. Her circumstances as a witness is she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. This guy doesn't have altruistic things. It's like, no, he's trying to blackmail you and get a payday off of this. So like, it is a very different situation because we don't know what's the motivation behind him doing that. Outright, it just seems like he's a scumbag. But maybe there's some secret reason why he wanted the money. But I think with everything he's done, the fact is he's got the little peep show and everything shows you like, oh, he's just a scumbag. So shouldn't feel too heartbroken about it. But it's still, no one wants to be responsible for death. So Tony tries to find a way out to help him. So she dumps a whole bunch of, I was like, the moment she was like, get the ice, I was like, okay, that's how you're going to do it. You're going to scare the ever living shit out of him and be like, yo, we're going to take your organs. And I love that he was running his mouth, and then Armand like pistol whip him hard as hell. I was like, yeah, he's like, oh, they brought in their goon, and then Tony's like, oh, don't worry about it. This ice you see, fact is, I was a surgeon in the Philippines. I'm going to take your organs. Oh, I could get this much. Oh, I could get this much for this. Oh, this much for both of your eyes. A bar. Then we'll take what we're going to do is take your skin and then take your heart, because we're going to get like $1 million over it. You could tell it's freaking Fiona out. But you see Armand kind of almost like, look how much this little dove has grown, how this little bird has grown in this time. Like seeing her like being so threatening like that, like obviously she doesn't mean anything, but the fact is she can make it convincing enough. You could tell like Armand was like, yeah, that's pretty good. And so luckily they got the password, deleted everything. And Fiona says this interesting line of like, yeah, you handled all that back there, like, around, all that stuff you said to John. And she was like, yeah, what about it? Like the fact is it didn't even register in her mind that she was like, oh, like, yeah, I played the role. That's it. She didn't think much of it. It's like, no, it was a little too easy for you that she's like, right, that's a little too convincing. She's like, the fact is around Armand, he brings that out of you. And it's like, right, she's not even recognizing the Tony that's in front of her. But like Tony's like, you can trust Armand. She's like, why? Like seeing what he like brings out and you like, why do you trust him so much? It's like, because when I call, he always shows up, Because I think even when she had said that, when that conversation came up earlier, she was looking almost like a whoa. Because I think she always had a feeling like there was something between Tony and Armand. But like in this very moment, she's looking, and I think she looked at Tony when she saw that, like that look in his eyes and him saying that with almost like a smile, like I'll always show up if you call. Showing like there is something there, which is going to complicate things once again with his marriage. I mean, they already kind of set up the whole him and Tony thing. So you're already like, I kind of want you guys to be together. They've already kind of thrown a wrench with Robert in their marriage. We'll get to that soon enough, but still. And especially because Nadia doesn't like Tony to begin with. She's been like, it's like the fact is that the way he bends over backwards for Tony, it's like, right, you step in for me every once in a while, but it always feels like I fall short. Me, your wife, I'll always fall short when it comes to Tony. You'll always go above and beyond. Like, considering our circumstances, you kind of abandoned what we were doing. I mean, granted, you weren't in a situation where it's like you could get the money, so who cares? But like, Tony called you, drop everything. You didn't report in. You're not keeping in contact with Robert. The only reason why you answered the phone was because it was me so like I said, we'll get to that in a second. But while they're cleaning up cleaning up the motel office, they find flash drives. We saw other ones, but I guess I saw the one that said like Stairs Kid. I don't know if the others were the same thing or not, but the point is the bastard had copies. If they had let him go after all this, he would have had still other copies. He didn't say jack shit about him. And it's like, well, we're not going to give you, because we have no idea how many more of these copies he has. So it's like, no, we have to do this because there could be other copies, there's no telling how many copies he made. You can't even trust that he's like, no, those are the only ones, because he sure as hell didn't tell you the first time, because he was going to be slick and screw you over. So even if he can't blackmail you anymore, he could send you to jail to make you pay for what you put him through. So it's like, oh, we got to put him down. Extortionists like his don't go away. He will always be a problem. It's because the video was no longer the problem. It's one problem, but now it's like he is the main problem now. So Armand's like, Because Fiona's like, I don't want to do. He's like, that no, that's why you brought me in. You don't have to be the killer. That's why you call me in to handle this. And Tony, because she didn't loop Fiona in with the decision earlier to bring in Armand, because it's like, no, that's her child. So it's like, right, what do you want? And then it's like saying the title of the episode, Bahala nah. It basically, there was Fiona kind of says it's like whatever happens, happens. So it's basically like it is what it is. So he dug his own grave. Whatever happens is kind of on him. So Armand does kill him, but you can see the hesitation when Armand does it later, because it's like Armand doesn't want to be this. He already kind of has to be this goon for Robert, but it's like there's a hesitation of like, right, he doesn't want to. He's falling into like that goon territory of like killing people, but it's also for Tony, and it's for Fiona and Tony, but because it's for Fiona and how important, obviously Fiona's her sister-in-law, that's her family, and Armand's all about family, so he's like, right, if you're important to Tony, then obviously you're important to me too. So he did this for them and put the guy down. So I don't think we're going to find out like something like, oh my God, what happened to him? Something tragic. It's like, well, there's also the thing of, he's like, if something happens to me, the cops will come sniffing around. It will be a little suspicious of, Marco died and this guy just happens to be at, the guy who runs the motel where that Marco died at just happens to disappear too. I guess they could always plant evidence to make it seem like he did it, or maybe later on they could. We'll have to wait and see. So, because I was also thinking like, this was like my big brain thought before, like if they had let him go, like say that's before we found out about the extra drives and stuff. Even if they had scared him into be like, okay, I won't say anything for you. My immediate thought was, well, he's perving on other people. Eventually, he will get caught. And when he gets caught, he's got his trump card of selling you guys out. That was my immediate thought. Like, oh, if you let him live, that's going to happen. Like I said, this was well before we found out that the flash drives were a thing. I was like, oh, don't let him live, because even if you scare him, when the situation comes for it, he'll end up selling you out to save his own hide. So, but it's kind of a moot point now. But just letting you know my initial thought on that. But, circling to the whole situation with Armand, Nadia, and the whole Robert thing. So they don't have, even selling stuff in the way like the medical supplies and stuff, the medicine with Tony like they did last episode, that still won't be enough to cover the basis for how like to cover the weekly, like, because they were able to get this week's pay, like this the week payment like null and void, but it's still like, right, even selling stuff with Tony won't be enough. And obviously Nadia's like, oh, we can go into the drug, like even like the more hardcore stuff. But it's like, no, we do that. Our boys who hooks us up, he's going to get his head in a box. So will we. So we don't want to like mess with that. We don't want to get into that territory thing, because it's like gun running was their thing. Drugs isn't. That's a whole other separate world that, especially you don't want to be stepping in other people's business in that regard. So once again, Nadia's biggest issue is like, we don't have to involve Tony, but it's like, Tony's the one that brought it to us. She's the one that knows what medicine sells. But once again, Nadia want to go like, well, let's start like cocaine and heroin type of stuff. So, but they kind of had no choice but to bend to what Robert wanted. They offered him like, cool, we'll work for you. Well, initially it was just like Armand, but getting what he wants. Robert's like, no, Nadia too. Like her expertise on betting and like having an eye for that and a mind for that as well, it could be useful to me. So they both end up having to work for him, paying off their debt. Armand tried to get the money from like that jockey, but the guy got away. It's like, he's like, I'd rather take my chances. It's like, Armand was probably the kinder person. Robert is not. If he doesn't send someone worse after you, Robert's going to handle it himself. And you don't want him to handle it himself because he's a scary motherfucker. Because Robert, like, Armand still has enough of him that he doesn't want to, like, hurt people. He felt bad about last episode. He's like, I nearly killed a guy in front of his own father. Like, that didn't sit well with him. And now you add on to, like, he's not trying, like, he has no choice in the situation as well. Like, he's like, I'm like everyone that owes Robert money, I'm in that same exact boat. I'm working off my debt, so. But like I said, that's why he went to Tony, because it's like, well, the guy got away anyway, so I can't, until he resurfaces, I can't do anything about it. But it's like, probably should have answered when Robert called, but it's like, yeah, I'm not at your beck and call. And even Nadia's like, right, if you treat us with a little bit more respect, then yeah, maybe that'll kind of go both ways. But for him, it's like, I already know, like, you've always had this respect about you, Nadia, because like they've had their history. He's also the one that kind of brought her here and kind of gave her, like, she's always been good at what she's done, but she kind of came from a background of nothing, just like Armand, and I think that's why they kind of got together. That's where they found common ground. But also, Robert even says all that he has now, it wouldn't have been possible if not for Nadia, and you see that smile on her face, because say what you will, Armand gets jealous, even saying like, right, I don't like the way he looks at you, which I think Nadia appreciates, being like, okay, so I still do matter to you, but it's like, no, like Robert compliments her in a way that, for one, he probably like knows her on a different level than Armand does. I just figured as much. I was like, now with Robert in the mix, I'm like, oh, that's going to complicate things when it comes to the Nadia thing. Just in a side note too, if Robert goes down, I think in the end, so will Nadia. Probably Armand too, because they're still working underneath him, so the whole castle of cards will come crumbling down. But I think in particular, where things will potentially end up at this end of the season, Nadia will be with Robert, and so when Robert takes the fall, like, so will Nadia. Or maybe he'll sacrifice her to save himself, or maybe she'll sacrifice him to kind of come out on top, and maybe she'll be away from Armand, maybe got rid of him, and sells Robert out so that she takes over the whole operation and becomes game in town. I don't know. That, once again, huge, like, speculation on my part, well down the road, so. But either way, where things currently stand is still kind of an awkward thing because, well, Nadia's like, oh, you're with Tony? Okay, bam. And so she's like drinking and hanging out with Robert. You're like, okay, that seems like a situation that's going to turn into, well, nothing will happen probably, but I think feeling, everyone wants to feel like seen and important and recognized for your skills, and where Armand's kind of failing on that front, Robert's excelling, especially because it doesn't help that they had their history too. And Tony's apologizing, like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to call trouble. But he's like, no, don't worry about it. You need anything, like, I'll always show up for you. So there's the interesting rub of that. And so it's like, right, Armand won't be expecting you tonight, so them just drinking, it's like, will it be more than that? Will it lead to more? Who knows? But I don't think that's that situation. I think that situation's about to take a turn. I figured it would, but we'll see if it actually will. But other than that, there's Maya and Garrett talk about him trying to still get her out of this situation. It's like Cortez is the one that does that to you. It's like, you're either going to end up jail or dead. Let me help you. But I guess she's so scared of Cortez, but also, well, Cortez is also scared of Robert as well. And it's like, but she didn't drop Robert's name. It's just like, before she could even say anything, it's like, okay, she said, I got to get out of here. I don't want to take the chance. Cortez is, because he's got eyes on his people, so he's got eyes on me, especially as his girlfriend. So. And Garrett trying to get the phone from Tony because that's his end to this investigation, because they don't know all that's on Maya's phone. But as his girlfriend, she probably is, being so close to the whole thing, she potentially has some information that they could use to their advantage. So he wants to take this opportunity to, use this to leverage his way onto the investigation with the agent that we met last episode who was investigating it. So. But it seems like at the very least for now, Tony is done with Garrett. She also, I was curious, like, cause she's still sitting on that, cause like, I don't know if she's probably going to use it in a very opportune moment for, not for Garrett's sake, but for, Armand's sake, but you still could end up using, Garrett, because it's all connected. Cortez, like, it doesn't seem like he's working with Peter, or at the very least he's someone that probably does. More so it's probably like a debt thing of like all the businesses that Robert's kind of involved in, got his hands in. So maybe Cortez is just another of that element. So, but Garrett's got the phone and everything, and he's getting himself into this investigation, but he could still end up being very useful. Like I said, Tony's kind of sitting on this information in her back pocket, and because Armand's like, right, I have to get from underneath Peter, so I have, because she's like, what if you can't pay back the debt? She's like, if you can't pay back the debt, and he's like, I have to, kind of have no choice, because I'm not going to be under that guy's thumb. Also, if we fail, like, he's the type of guy that probably would end up killing us too, probably. Well, more so me, because he'll find, like, he has probably other thoughts when it comes to Nadia, but ultimately we'll have to wait and see where that all goes. Obviously, kind of ending things on a little bit of a more lighthearted note, Nina ends up having her baby, and I think that whole situation was kind of good for Chris, like holding a baby in his hands. Like, I don't know, like I don't think it's going to be the end all be all solver of issues, but I think him holding that baby in his hands, I think it probably brought some form of serenity to him that I think it might help in the long run. But his issues are far from over. But everything's done for now, so we'll have to wait and see. Because going forward, it's just going to be a Chris thing, because they don't have to worry about anyone else knowing, but he still knows. And if anytime he's around his grandparents, it's just going to be a constant reminder. Especially, let's not forget, there's also that, because that's why I'm like, they could ultimately end up pinning it on the guy that guy John. They could still pin it on him, because that detective is most likely, once again, him suddenly disappearing, the guy who worked at the motel where Marco died. Because they did introduce that detective in episode 2, the one who's actually investigating Marco's case, and once again, it's supposed to look like a robbery and stuff. So I think they could pin it on him, use his disappearance to make it seem like, oh, he's the guy responsible for it. But also the problem is, it's like, well, if you do that though, they'll go looking for him and they'll probably try and track his presence. So it could easily turn into a bigger issue. So we'll see how that ultimately ends up playing out, where this all ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.